Entonces,
um, Buwan ng tao.
Kidamaga. Bring the inner woodland and
Kira.
yeah, settle down there, swampy.
I know I messed myself up because I try to like just joke around or whatever, but I don't even know how to say Kias anymore. Kayas. I'm like Kayas. I'm like what? Like, Kias? Whatever. Yeah, you know.
Hanging around those sodas too much.
Yeah. He's getting whack. Right? I mean, just kidding. No, but yeah. So, to all like, welcome back. We're we just kind of last two episodes we just kind of shared a bit about our lives, right? And just kind of like the gap. I think there's a gap there that um a lot of potentially um a lot of indigenous people might fall through, right? Just the whole being caught in between both worlds, right? And just the whole response, the sharp responses on both ends, but that's fine, right? At least those things got to be addressed. So I guess that idea, right? Like healing, right? Like to become to one side or to the other, or just walking both worlds. Um, just that idea of community healing, right? Like, um, so how would you think that, or what do you think about community healing?
Well, I think just like all things Indian, it's all complex.
Mm.
For some reason, like there's a lot of philosophy involved behind how we view ourselves as Indian people and how we build ourselves up. It's like hand in hand. You can physically witness all of that philosophy at once when you're in a Sundance, right?
Mm.
Every minute detail that goes into constructing that lodge and all of that kind of stuff and constructing the ceremony, sure it all comes together in that perfect way. Is an example of where we were once at with our philosophies, and like so that brings me into like when we talk about healing, we there's all kinds of different healing that needs to be done. To me, it is all beneficial and it's all plays a big role into what the community and the collective of the community is. So then we have physical. Well, we have like the surface level understanding, which is physical, mental, spiritual, emotional.
Mm.
But that's there just for so kids can understand what our indigenous, or more specifically, to get away from that word indigenous, what our Nahio philosophy was.
Mm.
So when we divide it into the four quadrants like that, like we do have a better understanding. We have a starting point. One thing I'd always like to mention when it comes to like medicine and healing within Nahio, there is no such thing as the medicine wheel.
Mm.
There's not even a word for Cree for the word medicine wheel, and so that comes from the Sioux people. But we use that as our framework to heal communities and to actually do some healing work and establish ourselves like that. But community healing altogether is we have to admit that we are all traumatized.
Mm.
One way, shape, or form. We're all traumatized and we all have work that needs to be done. The biggest part of that work to, I guess, establish yourselves in a holistic sense of healing as a community is it goes back to, partly the individual at your core, your to tap into that authenticity within yourself, what's within you. Because you have a big role in going forward and actually creating that whole community. So it starts by the individual.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to heal yourself first? And so that stems back to our old teachings, I guess. Like, and it goes back that Creator's given us a life to live and us to provide and us to, use our gifts to the best of our ability. But how do we take care of those gifts and how are we going to bring them back into the community? So that the next person can take our gifts and add it to their gifts. Mm-hmm. So then they can spread that goodness and then so spreads to the next. And there is our traditional way of how we go. We go the way of the sun. Yeah. And so that kind of stems into the spirituality part, but then we also have the physical health. We lost our ways of medicine. That's a sad fact. We can do our best to reclaim what we had medicinally in terms of physically healing people or giving them medicines inside. Do our best, but we're not ever going to reclaim that back again. to what it was. We can establish something very similar, very near to it, but that's that's a very big part we have to consider before we consider community health, greater community health, because we're traumatized people, but we're relying on white people half the time to provide us the services, to provide us with all this stuff. But what point are we going to use to actually look back at ourselves and say, like, this is where the answer is within ourselves, the community? And it goes back into, we don't have no buffalo to chase anymore. We don't have, we can't establish our lodges again. We're forced to live in colonization. Colonization's in our way to get back to healing. And that's our burden. And that's where we are having a hard time, is that because colonization's a wall to try to get back into that. So it kind of, just to pass it on to you, is like, ask these questions, like, what's the best way to avoid these barriers of colonization to get back to our true selves, a healed people within our own realms, within our own systems, to our own standards. I guess is like, it plays a big role and a big key into what community healing would look like, right? And community health it's needed. It's needed. I don't think we can ever be a naked people again without that sense of community and without a sense of good health.
I would just say one thing, like a side note, is like as much as we talk about heal, right? Like that's because that's our, like there's other I guess nations or communities that aren't Nihio, so there'd be like Soto or Ojibwe or like all those kinds of things, and it's just kind of understanding your understanding of how your words and your the life through that, right? That's just we encourage that, and not just so like we're not the template, right? But just those ideas that
these all come from our own experiences. I think that's all we can talk to, eh?
But I think so far there's been a lot. We've covered a lot of good things, like community healing, right? Like, and just that idea of colonization being a wall, right? That's huge, right? And we're still trying to figure those kind of things out. One of the things, and I just echo the things you've said, is like self-reflecting, right? That's huge. And that's one of the first things I've learned when I started to learn about the Nihil ways, is, or even just like sweat ways, right? Is like, at the end of the day, you're gonna have to take care of yourself, right? You can't be, like, come on, bro. Like you can't be trying to heal other people when yourself is broken, right? Or that you can't move on like that. So I think that's the biggest thing, and just working through that. And it's interesting because I've heard through a different kind of lens that they're like, so this is kind of I guess a Jewish kind of perspective, is like the alibi, something called the alibi, right? Where it's and I've always made fun of people that it's like it's always someone else's fault, right? But that's the alibi, right? We say it's always somebody else's fault when it's not. It's always a self-reflection, and just learning to what levels those apply to. But just coming back at the end of the day, right? Like, but just like realizing, like, we make mistakes. We're human. Like, we can be at fault. It can't always be somebody else's fault, right? You can't always. Like, I've had experiences with some bros, right? Like when I was like kind of falling away, where like I was smoking weed and I got my bros to smoke with me, and they're like, "But bro, you got me smoking weed," And I was like, dude, you're kind of like I can't. Like I didn't hold the joint to your mouth. I didn't light it for you. You know, like but these some guys, and that's part of that even Christian ideology is that like somebody else's fault, right? And we can't ever accept the blame from ourselves. And I think that's one small step that I think we can, um, just kind of just complimenting how you've said what you said, and how I see it, I guess. Right, like even returning to those kind of Sundance, that whole Sundance perspective, um, and that's wild being aware, like that our healing has to go beyond or deeper than just of mental, physical, emotional, mental, right? Like, so.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Is that when we take a second to, even with our own ceremonies, because sometimes we'll become comfortable in our own ceremonies, our own circles, sweat lodge, Sundance, whatever. We can become comfortable in that.
Mm-hmm.
But even to get an even greater image of what that power is, what that, I guess, that vibration of energy is that flows through there, to just look at it and to take even hours of sitting there when you're spectating the ceremony. You're sitting there and you're looking at you're looking at everything that's going on. It can take years to start memorizing a lot of the protocols, the meanings behind things. But once you get to that point, is you're looking at the ceremony as an object now, and you're saying, this is what this is. And then you're reflecting back into everything else you've learned in your life, and you're pushing all of that, and you're relating everything back to where it was. So like, even like, oh, they placed the pipe in this very specific way.
Yeah.
So what does that mean to you? What does that mean to that person who placed the pipe? What does that mean to the old woman sitting across there? And that's where, even to go into community healing, relationship making, kinship making, is that to get these answers, is that you have to go sit with that old woman across the arbor, across the sweat, and go talk to her. What does she know about that thing? Then you go sit with the headman over there. You offer tobacco. You say, what does this mean to you? Then you offer tobacco to your people back home, who taught you, throughout your childhood. And say, you just ask them, what does this mean to you? Yeah. To you? Connecting those dots, because we're missing. And we find when we talk about the longing we have for our ceremonies, we talk about the longing, this mystery is like, when you pick up a rattle and then all of a sudden you you start shaking it, and all of a sudden you feel that like, why does it feel like I've done this before? Or why does it feel like this is so natural to me? Those connections are starting to come back, because they were viciously, violently ripped away from us, taken to residential schools. That was an act of that violence. But going back to there, holding those drums, holding those rattles again, looking at the ceremony for what it is, reflecting on your life, reflecting on colonization, reflecting on the greater picture, is a start for that individual healing, so we can have a start on the community healing. That's how I see it. It's very interesting concepts.
Yeah.
And these are things that I've learned from, I guess, one of my biggest teachers was the late John Sugar. And people had their beef with him, right? But I've learned so much, because him too come from that background of Christian. He grew up in Regina here. He was a thug back in the 70s here in the city. Telling me all kinds of stories of going to go break into Safeway and steal a couple grand, and then leaving and go hiding it or in a shop somewhere, Great, but then going through the pen, going through the jail system, processing himself, going through the Sweats family, learning that. And that's where I learned a lot of this from. And even my old grandmother, my old Kushi, who passed away now, she was 94, named Ruth Wadidika. She taught me, she always taught me a lot of Dakota language, but she also taught me a lot of just the spirituality too. And that was part of my adopted family. When I said I moved when I was 14, moved back to this other family there, they adopted me. And so they started teaching me, and so I got a perspective of Cree ways, Dakota ways, Assiniboine ways, born again Christian ways. got a perspective of like, you know, even popular TV culture too, like those ways are. And then so kind of like, it's like a puzzle. It ends up